Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. If you have your own song you'd like to submit for special selection, you can find a link to do so in the description below. This one comes from Matthew. It says Lake of Oblivion by Panzer Kunst. It's my band's first song with odd time signature and polyrhythmic metal. We're big fans of Meshuggah and Humanity's Last Breath. Thank you. So, let's dive into this. We have the official drum playthrough of Lake of Oblivion. Let's dive into it and see what's going on. Oh, is this shot in 60? Yes. I knew it looked very crisp. Very heavy right out the gate. Oh, the little cymbal nuance. Yeah, gnarly vocals. The time signatures are definitely all over the place there. Wild atmospheric sounds too. Yes. The guitars are just laying down the rhythm while the drums are allowed to mess around with polyrhythms. The guitars and bass just chugging down there. More of these atmospheric tones. I love the shifting from downbeats to offbeats there. Yeah. So the guitar rhythm is slightly off from our drums. Our drums are in a static pattern right here, but they're constantly shifting accents against what the guitars are doing. The vocals are interestingly very clean production-wise. Especially compared to how gritty our guitars are. Bringing the tempo down a little, or at least the feel a little bit here. Yeah, really cool moment just there, playing around with note lengths on the guitars. We're still doing it, actually. We got the cymbal laying down our core beat while everybody else is allowed to dance around it. Actually, very cool. I don't understand how drummers can do this. I really don't. We have some very airy, wide tremolo picking back there. That was neat. Is that part of the song? Or is that just a tone for this promotional bit here? It goes for another 10 seconds. Alright, it fades out. Yeah, the ending was very cool there because we had this tone in the background starting to widen and wash out. It was starting to lose some of its core power and sort of just ripple out to the sides, and it was making the song sound very large. And it immediately gets cut out, so we get this very flat sound with the two snare hits there at the end, the two flams, to just finish it out. And yeah, just like huge, making bigger, and then just like pop the bubble. And then, get our two staccato notes there to finish the track out. Very cool as far as subverting expectations and really making those last two snare flams pop in contrast, because they punch so far through where we were getting this sort of really wide sound previously. So yeah, definitely a song that plays around with things rhythmically, and this is their first song that they've released. I checked their channel, and all they have is a trailer. Yep, a teaser for this song's visualizer that came out 6 months ago. 3 months ago, they dropped the visualizer for this track, and last month they dropped the drum playthrough. So between that and having 77 subscribers and this being the only song on the about on their YouTube channel just says extreme metal. I mean, to the point. I dig it. I don't need to read a paragraph. Just tell me what kind of music you're making. They also only have one track on their Bandcamp. So I'm going to assume that these guys are brand new. This is the first song they've done, that they've released, that they've put together, that they've put together as a band. So I don't want to be too heavy on criticisms because this is a huge step in the right direction. But it also was very much not my cup of tea, and I'm going to do my best to stay off of the topics where the song doesn't work for me because it's just not my kind of music. So let's talk about what they did phenomenally. First of all, the rhythmic components I think work very well. There is always a groove, whether it's the bass kick, cymbals, the guitars. Somebody is keeping our core time signature that allows the song to have that underlying movement. Because if everybody is doing odd rhythmic ideas, it's very difficult for the listener to find the groove. And if you're trying to emulate bands like Meshuggah, and while they weren't mentioned, Animals as Leaders as well, although this definitely falls into line with Meshuggah a lot more than Animals as Leaders. But anyways, the idea is if you're going to do something that is rhythmically difficult to follow, You want to have something in there for the listener to latch onto, just to groove along with. And it's really interesting. Well, first of all, nailed it. Every section of this has a groove. If you didn't know that they were working with an odd time signatures, or if you didn't care about that, you weren't listening critically, you might not even notice it. A lot of this just flows. But I love how it's not always the drummer who's laying down this idea. Yes, it is most of the time, and this is something that we see often in this style of music. Cymbals laying down our core beat while everything else gets to be syncopated around that. And we do hear that occasionally. But I also really love that in two of the sections, at least, our guitars chug on eighth notes. Sort of unaccented eighth notes. It's just a constant chug. You get this core idea of what the beat and the downbeat and the offbeat are without accents. So what that means is that at any point in time, you can say, oh, this is the groove of the section. This is what I should be headbanging to. And it doesn't designate a phrasing. So really, you can, at any point in time, just key into it. Oh, this is what's going on. There's no accented beats. You don't know where one is. It's not giving you that information. But your average listener doesn't care about that. They just want to find the groove so they can move with it. So fantastic job utilizing that, because what that does is it frees up the drummer to be the syncopated instrument. Now, granted, there's a lot of instruments on the drums. There's 4 limbs that can be used. Not all 4 of them have to be syncopated. Not all 4 of them have to be leaning into the beat. But it does allow the drummer to not have to worry about that role. I don't think there was a moment in here where all 4 limbs were doing syncopated polyrhythmic ideas. I think there's always at least one instrument laying into the groove with the guitars in those moments. But it does open up the option for the drummer to go completely outside the box without the listener being pulled out of that space. And I think that's really awesome. Secondary on this topic, though, is there's this moment at the end. I mentioned, I don't know how the drummer can do this, right? It's just, it blows my mind because I don't have this skill as a performer. 2 of the limbs were on, I think we were getting the downbeats, or maybe it was every other beat. No, it was the downbeats. So I think it was our crash cymbal and our hi-hat. So left foot, right hand. We're working in tandem to lay down every beat. Our snare was on every other beat with an occasional accent, if I remember correctly. And our bass kick, our right leg, was following along with the syncopated rhythm of our guitars. How? Why? No. My brain can't do this. It boggles me to listen to this stuff, especially to view it. I think viewing it really helps, especially since this song to me is really led by the drums. I think it's it's interesting to me that the drums were the first one to get a playthrough, because they are, in my mind, the highlight of the song. And we'll get into this later about why, but being able to see what the drums are doing rather than just hear really helps me understand what's going on. More so than the guitar, which I can hear and say, oh, they've gone up the neck or they've shifted to another string, which that's a little more difficult to hear, but within context, I'm more used to. I've played guitar. I have a bass. I'm a bassist. I can hear little ideas like, oh, that's a big jump. They probably shifted strings. That kind of idea. Palm muting, tremolo picking. Like, I can hear these things and perceive them. But when I listen to drums, I don't always get that sort of visual information just from the audio. So it was really nice, like there at the beginning when I had mentioned the nuance in the cymbal playing, where he had two sticks, both on the ride cymbal, I think it was, and was bouncing around the different places, different parts of the cymbal, different parts of the bell, and getting all this little nuanced sound that honestly I didn't hear, but it was very cool to see that attention to detail put in there. And then the other thing is, rhythmically, it's pretty easy to feel a polyrhythmic idea. You're like, oh, these two ideas just don't jive together too well. Bam, you're in polyrhythm territory. But to see how the polyrhythms line up physically, visually, to see both hands come down at one time and then get an offbeat and get like actually the visual hemiola, which happened a few times in here, was very neat, where you get both and then you get kind of an alternate and then both again. It's just very cool to see that. I don't know what it is. Seeing rhythms works so much better for me than hearing them. I can hear that they're odd, but when I see them, I can see why they're odd. I can see specifically what's happening, and that's very cool. So yeah, I'm very happy that the drum playthrough came out first here, because it is what I would probably be the most excited about, since I'm pretty good about hearing the rest of it. The guitars. The guitars are very cool because they jump between two ideas, and one I'm okay with. We've already talked about it. It's when they just kind of lay down the constant eighth notes. And sometimes they move around in notes, sometimes you just kind of stick on it and move with chordal shifts. Not a lot of wild ideas there. The other thing that the guitars do when they take more of a lead element is the rhythmic, djenty kind of stuff, where they'll it's a really cool playfulness of note length. Whereas in some bands like Meshuggah, they are constantly playing, and it's the pockets of notes that change up things. Maybe they'll do 5 of the same note, and then 3 of the same note, and then 1 of a note, and then 2 of the same note, and then back to the 5, and then 8 of a different note. And that's where the disjointedness comes from, by the pockets of constantly playing. But here, what I really like is that we have pockets of note length, which is the same idea, just with less attacks. We only attack when we change notes. And this is just easier for me to visualize mentally, because instead of thinking that this is a pocket of 5 eighth notes and this is a pocket of 8 eighth notes and it's a pocket of 3, I can think of just notes, right? 5 eighth notes is a half note tied to a quarter note, or yeah, a half note tied to an eighth note, and I can think of it that way. Right, and thinking about how we have these different groupings of notes. So maybe we do have a dotted quarter, and then we have an eighth, and then a quarter, and then another dotted quarter, and then a half dotted, and then a half tied to an eighth. And like just being able to kind of see how each of these notes are different. Because sometimes when I listen to music, I get notation in my head. And so I'm actually seeing these notes kind of being placed down as I'm hearing them. And getting to see all the different shapes, because each note, of course, has its own visual identity to it, whether it's just a stick or if it has a flag. Is that backwards for you? Yeah, that's backwards for you. If it's a stick, or if it has the flag, or no, actually that would be, yeah, anyways. Or if it has 2 flags, or if it's connected to something, or if it's filled in, or they all have different visual shapes to them. And being able to see all of it, because a lot of music tends to be similar shapes. We talk about all the time, 4 on the floor is just constant quarter notes, right? We talk about tremolo picking as constant eighth notes or constant 16th notes. There's no difference in the visual identity. It's very uniform in the notation. And having all these different groupings here, it's just very interesting the way it goes through in my head when I'm listening to that moment. And then getting the visual component here of hearing that and hearing the guitars change and then the snare hit and actually getting to see the snare hit against it. Just very cool stuff. Anyways, I love that section. That is just a very cool type of polyrhythmic idea to me. I don't know why one attack per note feels so much better to me than what Meshuggah does with their constant attacks, but I can just groove along with this better. Maybe it's just the less frequent attacks stress me out less. I don't know, but I really dig that. Vocals are just here's the thing though. I got to talk about this. Okay, so the vocals are like sick, right? I don't know how the vocalist makes these sounds. I don't know how most harsh vocalists make the sounds they do. It's just it fits what's going on. But I want to talk about the production real quick, because the vocal production is very clear, very clean. It almost sounds like there is no extra compression put on the vocals at all. And if there is, it's like slight. There's something that just sounds very clean. Like I can hear every crackle in this dude's voice sound that they're making. Um, I can't make out words. It's not clearly enunciated, but it is clearly produced. I want to put that divider there. This is not a clean, harsh vocal, but it's a cleanly produced harsh vocal, which sounds really interesting when we pair that against our guitars, which are very grittily produced. There's a lot of extra compression, it sounds like, on top of it. The wavelengths are getting flattened out. It's got this fuzz that sits above the note. It is just very different. And it's interesting to hear them paired against each other where the guitars are kind of pushed into the mix. They're kind of removed of their core element, whereas our vocalist is elevated. It's like, yeah, you did, you're making this sound perfect. I don't need to touch anything on it. Let's just put it into the mix, whereas the guitars have to get grittied up or something. I don't know. That's just kind of how I imagine the process went. But it's very interesting to hear the gritty guitars and the clean vocals. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the way that everything's produced and mixed in this. It's just something that I noticed that was interesting because usually, at least to my ears, the vocals, especially harsh vocals in more extreme metals, tend to get that extra gritty production put on top of them just to make them even more gnarlier. And it doesn't feel like that happened here, but not to a detriment. It's just very cool to hear it kind of separated that way. Um, and then I will talk about it real quick. I need more melody in my music. I don't want to put a whole section on this. Um, this is the same thing I've had to say about Animals as Leaders and Meshuggah. It's the reason why a lot of it bounces off of me. And so, yeah, I just want to say that this is very competently made. This is a phenomenal entry. If this is the first thing that you've ever put together, released into the world, you have a phenomenal starting point. You can only go up from here. It's just not my type of music. So if there's anything that I said today that felt a little bit negative or like criticism, it's probably coming from that angle. It's just not my type of music. But I don't want to tell you guys to change either. Matthew, if you're watching this, or anybody from Panzer Kunst, don't change what you're doing for me. Because you guys are on the right path for where you want to go. It's just not my type of music. Normally here I dig into some lyrics. I will say real quick, I couldn't hear the bass. That's kind of typical in this style, especially if they're doing the same thing the guitars are doing. It could also have been for this. Actually, I didn't even think about that. The email. I'm pretty sure I got the email. I was talking with Matthew about this. Was I talking with Matthew about? I don't know. Actually, I might be confusing this with something else. Because I think I just got an email about somebody else who put out a drum version of a song they requested. But I think that was for creator request. Anyways, the drums seem to be elevated in this mix. I don't know if that's normal. It doesn't sound bad. It doesn't feel like they've been pushed way up to make them more prominent, but they do feel a bit higher than they should be. Again, I don't know if that's for the drum playthrough or not, but yeah. If it's not, forget about it. Or sorry, if you did do it just for this video, then forget about the comment. But if that is how it typically sounds, I might push the drums down or maybe give the guitars a boost. They're very quiet down there. And like I said, the bass doesn't get any favors from that either. I feel like they're already being covered up by the guitars. That is kind of typical for extreme metal stuff. So, I mean, maybe, again, take that with a grain of salt. But if the bass is doing anything awesome, I would love to hear it. If it's just following along with the guitars, I'd still love to hear it. But I understand why it gets kind of lost in the mix on that. After, though, this is typically where I do the lyrical dive, but there are no lyrics out there. I checked their Bandcamp page, I checked the official visualizer, I checked the comments of the visualizer, I checked a couple of sites, I did a web search. It does not seem that the vocals are published anywhere, and like I had mentioned, I had a difficult time making heads or tails out of what the vocals were doing. So I think I'm just going to wrap it up here, reiterate once again that this is a phenomenal first track to release. The production's there, the writing is there. There's still room for improvement. You can always hone the craft and continue to work on your polyrhythm game. It is a bit simple here. Like I mentioned, there's a couple of places where we just kind of double up on rhythmic ideas, especially doubling up on the laying down the time signature, but it also works at keeping it just a bit more simpler for your average listener as well. So whether you want to kind of dig more into the polyrhythmic ideas, get more technical, or kind of sit in the easier to listen to categories, completely up to you. And you can always jump between them and have an album that is diverse, that explores both sides of the spectrum. But yeah, I mean, like I said, for a first time release, this is phenomenal, and you only have up to go. Those are my thoughts on Panzer Kunst's Lake of Oblivion. This is where you guys come in. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know if you enjoyed this or not, anything that stood out to you, anything you'd like to add on to my analysis or correct me on. Let me know. Above the comment section is a description box, and there's a link for Linktree. It takes you to this menu right here. It has links for everything related to the channel. You can follow me on Twitter, join the Discord, support the channel through Patreon, pick up some merch, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Also, this isn't creator request, but I'll also plug them anyways because it kind of is a request from a creator. If you are digging this, definitely go check out their YouTube channel. Even though it only has the one track, and the Bandcamp. I'll link both down below. You guys can go check that out and subscribe to them or bookmark them or whatever you want to do so you'll know when they release new music. Alright, until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.